Hello and welcome back to Pop Culture Yearbook. This is our third episode on the year 2013. Last week we talked about a couple movies, and this week we're going to transition to some music choices. I am Brad,
I am Pete.
and we are here to try to entertain you today. So, Pete, I don't know how much we want to say, but this is our second chance trying to record this episode. We've been having some audio issues, and we know there was a couple issues in our 94 series. Not too bad, but a couple spots, and we tried to apologize in the descriptions for those. But we're always
all
here
about
working to make
continuous
things better.
improvement.
Say that again?
I said we're all about continuous improvement, as
That's
all
right.
podcasts are.
We're always trying to make things better. So here we are, meeting again to redo what we have already discussed. That's how it works behind the scenes here.
That's right. And Gifford is still serving his suspension, so hopefully he'll be back with us in a couple of weeks.
Yes, looking ahead to May, we should have him back with us again. All right, so our music episode this week is going to focus, of course, on 2013, which when we first kind of discussed this, I remember, Pete, you saying that you did not have a whole lot of stuff to discuss or memories of that year. Anything you want to elaborate on with that?
Well, 2013, I had a 1-year-old and I had like a 5-year-old that year. It was just a lot of adult responsibilities, so not a lot of like sitting down and just listening to music as much as I probably would have liked. That wasn't kids' music. I think I watched a lot of Dora the Explorer. We could do an episode on that if you wanted to, but I didn't think that would be very entertaining for our listener. Maybe some of them it would. I could have done Backyardigans too, another one of my favorites.
Oh, I could do Backyardigans.
That was a great show. Very underrated.
Maybe someday down the line, when we're recycling a year, we'll do that.
We could do a Nickelodeon episode. That'd be fantastic.
That's true.
But I did pick an album that stood out to me as one that I wanted to explore. We'll get into that. But first, I think you had one that you wanted to go through, right, Brad?
Yeah. So when we first picked the year, I didn't really, I didn't know what to expect because it's the most recent year that we've discussed so far. But as in looking at it, it turned out to be like a lot of good stuff to choose from, movies and music-wise, and TV for that matter. And what I noticed about the music is that this was kind of a really big year for me as far as like musical transition. So I am a huge fan of CDs. Like I grew up and I had a few records and I had tapes, but like when I got into high school and I was able to start buying my own stuff, CDs were huge. And I got a CD player in 9th grade, and I just started buying them over and over. And I mean, I don't even know how many CDs I've owned in my life, but I love them. I love the physicalness of them. I love that they have the little book inside, and they're not as big as an album, but they have the artwork and everything. And so I've always bought CDs, and they are important to me, my little collection that I have. And just less than 2 years ago, we moved to a new home, and all my CDs were in like a cabinet that were easy to access. And so everything got packed up, and they've been sitting in boxes ever since. And a couple things that I realized. First of all, the year 2013 is kind of like when I stopped buying them. That was the year where I realized when I was looking through the CDs that I did own, they kind of stopped between like 2010, 2012. There was a couple I still bought then, especially some really big bands that like I had all their other albums, so I wanted to buy them. Mm-hmm. But I was really moving into the whole digital area. I got my first smartphone in 2013, so once I got that, then it was really easy to just, download iTunes and just get whatever you wanted. So this was around the time where I quit buying those CDs and kind of thought, well, maybe I'm not getting as much new stuff, but actually I was. And what I went back and found is I discovered a whole bunch of bands that I really, really love during this year. And so I really maybe don't own any actual compact discs of any of them, but I do own all of their stuff digitally.
Mm-hmm.
And just to follow up on that, the exciting thing for me recently is, so I mentioned in a previous episode that we got a record player. And some of those have CD players built in and radios, and like they're kind of like an all-in-one. And so when I bought one, I wanted to make sure it did have the CD player option. And so
Right.
we did. A couple weeks ago, we did. And I bought a few vinyl records since then. But what was exciting to me was I went into our storage room, I took out my big boxes of CDs, and I got to go back and sort through and put them all back out again. And as I'm doing that, I'm like, holy cow, there's so many here that I forgot I had. And like, I want to listen to this now. And so it was really fun to do that. And so it was able to, it's kind of like this is that perfect intersection of time where I moved away from those, but I still own them and I still love them, and started buying things online and then discovering new bands that way.
Yeah,
And
there's oh, I was just going to say, just like with records, there's definitely a little bit of a feeling of nostalgia there with listening to the old the old CDs. I think I was going through my stuff. My parents moved out of their house 3 or 4 years ago, and going through, I found my old Milli Vanilli tape, and I so badly just wanted to play that tape, even though I can listen to the music anytime that I wanted to on like you said, iTunes. It would have been a lot of fun to be able to play it, but I've got nothing to play it on.
right, and who wouldn't want to listen to Milli Vanilli?
They're great. That's a great album. I don't care who sang it. That was a great album. But
That's one that I owned on cassette tape back in middle
yeah,
school.
it's
And you're
yeah,
right, I loved it. In fact, I remember we had to analyze a song in our English class in eighth grade, and the song that I picked and we got to play the song and then talk about our little what we wrote about it. And the song that I picked was "Girl, I'm Gonna Miss You" by Milli Vanilli.
oh, that's a
So,
great song. Who cares who sang it? I don't get why they totally shut it down after that whole scandal. They could have still continued the music and it would have been great. Who cares who
I
sings?
there's probably too much shame for everybody involved. I don't think it would have worked out after all
It was
that, but
great music though. Very sad.
it was sad because didn't one of those guys kill himself?
He did.
Yeah.
But it was well after. It wasn't
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah. I know. It wasn't like the day after the Grammys or anything,
was
but
it
yeah.
Rob Pilatus or Fab Morvan? Is that
That
their names?
hey, good job. I remembered Fab. I couldn't remember the other one.
Yes, yes. I can't remember which one committed suicide though. I think it might have been Rob.
I feel like you're right, but I don't know. All right. Anyway, getting back to our choices then. So, one example of one of these bands that I discovered around this time was The Head and the Heart. And this is one of my all-time favorite bands. And they are not like, a hugely successful commercial band, but they do have a pretty big following. And in like the alternative radio world, I mean, they are quite successful and they get bigger with every album, I think. Um, but my brother had found them and he had introduced me to them, and I had owned two songs of theirs from their debut record. And I loved those two songs. Like I listened to them all the time. And I don't know why. For some reason, I never like listened to the rest of the album. I liked these two songs, so I just kept listening to them. So I didn't really get into them. I just knew that I liked those. But this year, 2013, their second album came out, which is called Let's Be Still. And I heard their first single called Shake on the radio, and I loved that song. And so now, okay, well, now there's a new album and there's a new song that I love. So I finally realized I should look into them a little bit deeper.
Hmm.
And what I found is that their first album is amazing. It's very more folky and independent sounding. I think they actually put it out on their own or something like that.
Right.
Um, the second album is a little more major label type, a little more produced, but still sticks to their sound pretty well. And so I started listening, and I didn't go and just like buy their albums right away because it's digital. So I just started like listening to songs, and I kept adding songs here and there. And eventually I finally got to the point where like, well, geez, just go get them. So I bought them both. And the reason why I picked this album is because this would be the time frame where they really took off for me.
Hmm.
But they've got four full-length albums, but if I was going to make a top five like of songs of theirs that I love, I could easily take five songs off of this album and be satisfied that that's my 5 favorite songs of theirs of all time. Now, there's plenty of other songs I like just as much on other albums, but off of this album, Let's Be Still,
Right.
like I could make a top five and that would be it. That's how much I like those songs, and that's why this album stands out to me. The other thing that's important to me about them is that it's not just me. I mentioned my brother likes them, my sister and her family does too, but then my whole family does too. So my wife, she always she likes a lot of the music I do, but it takes her like 2 years to get into it. Like I'll tell her about a band and she'll just kind of blow me off. And it's really annoying because it's important to me, but she just doesn't want to do it. And then like 2 years later, she'll come back and say, "Hey, I was listening to this song and I really like them." I'm like, yeah, I tried to get you to listen to that 2 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
So, but this is one where she did get into them. She loves them. Also, my kids who are middle school, high school age now, they love them too. And in fact, we saw them in concert 4 years in a row before the pandemic hit. The first time was in 2016. The two of us went and saw them at Northrop Auditorium at the U. And then the next year, we took a trip to Colorado as a family. And the main reason we went there was because they were playing at Red Rocks and we had never been there. And so the whole family went and saw them at Red Rocks. Then they played here again at the Armory in Minneapolis and we went. And then the next year, they were back at Red Rocks again. And we didn't really have much planned that summer for a trip. So my wife and I took a little like 24-hour hiatus and went to Denver and got a car for 24 hours and saw them at Red Rocks again and came home. And it was great. It was just a short little trip, but it was totally worth it. So we love them. I love this album. And that would be the reasons why I picked it. I have more statistics and things I can talk about, but Pete, why don't you share what you thought?
No, I just first I just want to talk about that. You brought up the point that they are kind of on their way up a little bit, but they're not yet. They haven't really made it huge yet. But do you think that that's kind of like it's much tougher nowadays for a band to work their way from the bottom up, whereas back in our day, like in the '80s and whatever, I mean, bands would start local and then they would kind of work their way up, become more and more popular by today's standards. I think that today it just feels like it's just more commercialized, where big executives will decide who's going to be big this year, and it's just all marketing and all of that kind of stuff. I think it's more top down nowadays. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I agree to a point. I do think it's always been that way, though.
It has, but I think more so now than it was 20 years ago, 30
But I
years
also
ago.
think it's more about like what type of music are you putting out there. So this would be, so they're on the chart. So here's some. So they actually, when this album came out, it debuted at number 10 on the Billboard Top 200, which
Right, that's
surprised me.
not
It
bad.
was bigger than I thought it was actually,
Right.
because this is even like they're pretty well known now, but back then, I mean, they were very much just kind of getting out there. It was number 5 on the digital albums, and it was the number 1 independent album, and it sold over 200,000 copies. So there is some success there. The thing that I think is different from what you said is that bands, everything is so fragmented now. It's like you fit into certain niches.
Yeah,
That's where you're
yeah.
gonna, so they're what would be called adult alternative airplay. And so when I was
Right.
looking up like some charts of theirs, they've had 7 top 10 hits, but it's on the adult alternative airplay, and that's what they're going to be on. And they might be big in that world, and they have had some of their songs kind of cross over a little bit. The couple from their last album were played on a lot of radio stations here that I
Yeah.
heard. Maybe they weren't huge, but like they were branching out a little bit there, and maybe someday, who knows, maybe they will. But I just feel like their sound is, it's a certain type of sound.
Yeah.
Although on the other hand, when they like, especially when they first started, they were really be compared to like Mumford and Sons, because Mumford and Sons, they're the big band,
Yes.
that
Yes.
folky area that did hit it big and like everybody listened to. And so you're right, like that's an example kind of against what I'm saying, where they played this type of music and they did get out there like huge.
Right.
This is a band who's like in that next tier down below that, who never got that big, but kind of stuck in their world there, I guess.
So we may have brought the point up before, is that in today's world it's more diluted. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is that
Yeah, that's a good word. I said
because
fragmented, but diluted works.
yeah, yeah, that's the way I think of it, is because back then there's only like 3 radio stations to choose from. Everybody basically heard the same music. Some people like different things than others, but now you just go listen to whatever fits your genre that you like, and you don't really
Right.
branch out to, like, if you don't like heavy metal, you don't have to listen to any of it. Whereas
I
back then
do.
they would play a little bit of whatever, and then you would hear some of that other stuff that you wouldn't otherwise listen to, and then you'd end up liking some of it.
I do wonder though if that's more got to do with where we grew up,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
so we grew up on farms, as we've said, in a very small town, and so yeah, there was like there's a
One
country
radio
radio
station.
station, and there's an oldies radio station, and there's a pop radio station, and that's about all you had there.
Right.
And so that's all we could hear. But like if you lived in Minneapolis, I mean, there
There's
were
more
bands
choice.
out there like before REM hit it big. I mean, college rock scene, the Replacements, bands like that. I mean, punk bands, they were out there, and so I think they did exist, and
Yeah.
and somehow people found them. But where we grew up, we weren't going to find them. So in that way, I think it is still probably similar.
Yeah, that's true. Fair point.
Fair point.
All
Um,
right.
so yeah,
Uh,
but anyway, long story short, I guess they are a pretty big band in their world, and they've had some success kind of getting into some other areas. And so, one place where I know a lot of people might recognize their songs, I mean, there's certain songs that have been played in movies and on TV shows a lot too, and that's where you hear some bands that maybe you don't know who they are, but you would recognize them if you heard them.
right.
So, they're the kind of band that that's very, very important to me personally, and that's why we do this podcast. And if people are listening to this and they know of them and like them, that's wonderful. And I would love to hear about that. And if people have never heard of them, I hope they take the time to listen to this podcast and maybe check them out. And if you like them, great. And if you don't like them, great. I mean, but hopefully maybe a new fan or two gets born that way. So
There you
that's what we
go.
try to do, right?
Absolutely. Well, you may have found a new fan in me, because I haven't listened to Head in the Heart all that much until you had asked me to give it a listen for the purposes of this podcast. And I thought it was a very good album. I did enjoy it. It fits kind of in, well, I kind of like a lot of different genres, but as long as it's good. And I did think this was a really good album. You'd asked me to kind of dive into what my thoughts were before you start in on the album itself. I do want to start off with what I thought were my top 5 favorite songs. You'd asked me to put together what I thought my top 5 were, and then I know you have your list. We kind of compare notes that way. So, um, my favorite songs were "Homecoming Heroes," which is the first song on the album. "Another Story," "Shake," "Let's Be Still," and "Josh McBride." Those were the 5 songs that really stood out to me. That there's a couple of other ones that I could have had on that list, but those were the ones that I would put on my top 5. Brad, how does that compare to your list?
And it's just interesting to hear another one because so you had actually three of the same ones that I love. So I mentioned there are five songs to me that stand out.
Yes.
Shake, Another Story, and Let's Be Still, which all I think were all considered maybe not Let's Be Still, but I know Shake and Another Story were like singles that people
Released.
could have heard or found
Yes.
somewhere.
Yes.
So those three I love, and they're great songs to listen to in concert too. Let's Be Still, it's such a pretty song, and the way they played in concert, it sounds different than the album, and it just they give you this feel, and that's what I love about them. And like you talk about, if you've been to Red Rocks, the type of music you'd want to hear, they just fit that venue perfectly. That's why we went there twice, because we love them, but like I've never been there before, and they felt like the perfect band to go see there, and it did not disappoint.
I love that place. In fact, I just saw a stand-up comedy special on Netflix that was broadcast from there, or filmed there. It was Joe Rogan. Have you seen him stand-up act? He's
No, I
pretty
mean I
good.
know who he is. I've never seen him do a stand-up
He,
act.
yeah, he's pretty good. Not to get off topic, but he'll remind you of Will Ferrell. He kind of looks like Will Ferrell. But anyway, I digress. It just looked like a cool place to be as I was watching. And I know that you had been there, so I was thinking of your trip there.
Yeah. I hope so. You just froze up there for like 2 seconds just to bring the. I hope we don't have any more of those audio problems. We'll
Right.
address them when they come up. But you didn't. We didn't lose you, so we can keep going here. I think.
Okay.
Um. So this album. So I mentioned the three that I like. There are a couple songs in this album that I kind of, in the past, kind of skipped. I don't think it's because I don't like the songs so much as it's like the songs that I love so much. I just like, I want to get through this one. Just get me to the good one.
Right.
And one of those songs that I kind of skipped was Josh McBride, which is one of your favorites. So it's interesting to hear from a different perspective
I'm entitled
what
to
you
my own
pick.
opinion, Brad.
I know, and that's great. But I will say,
Well,
listening to it again this time, because I wanted to listen to the whole album beginning to end, because that's what we do. So I wasn't going to skip anything, no matter what. But
yeah.
like, I'm listening to that song, knowing that it's not one of my favorites. And I'm like, yeah, this song's fine. I have nothing against this song at all. So, like I said, I don't need to skip it. It's just, one that doesn't stand out to me.
As I did the review of this album, I thought it was good because a lot of the albums that we do, it's like, okay, I haven't necessarily heard the whole album before, but I have heard or I know really well about 3 or 4 songs, the ones that have been released. So this one, I wasn't as familiar with those songs that have been released. So it was good because when I do that, I'm not, I don't have that previous bias,
Right.
and so it's good that I was able to, pick out. I did pick a couple of the ones that wound up that were released anyway. So that was good.
So
Go
the
on,
other
Brad.
two that I love
Yes.
that we didn't get to yet, which I know one of them is one that you actually didn't like. So it's kind of like your Josh McBride. I'm shocked. The song 10,000 Weight in Gold is one of my all-time favorites.
It
And
just
I'm,
didn't hit me, and maybe it will if I listen to it more and more. But on the first, I listened to the album twice, and that one just didn't quite pull me as some of the other songs did.
so
But
interesting.
yeah.
And then my last one is the closing song on the album, which is called Gone. And that is probably my favorite song of theirs of all time, really. If I had to pick just one, it's one
Okay.
of those songs. So I love songs that give me that emotion and like there's certain songs that make the hair on my arm stand up or give you the goosebumps, that kind of a feel.
Right.
And this is one of those songs every time I hear it. I'm not a huge lyrics guy, but this is the kind of band where you hear their lyrics really well. And the lyrics of that song are just amazing. I think it's such a sad song. It's about like losing somebody, like a breakup, and them on your mind and not getting back. And but it's so relatable. Um,
Right.
and the thing though that works too is so the lead singer, we've always me and my wife both just love his voice. And I think his voice is just so unique and great all the time, but it hits you in a song like this. There's those emotional moments where he's singing and it's perfection. And this isn't one of their like or bigger songs or anything. It's kind of a buried album track. Like it's the last song on this album, and I had looked at some of their playlists for concerts and really didn't see it on there. And the first time we saw them, they didn't play it. But then we went to Red Rocks, and right in the middle of it, they played this song, and it was like a religious experience for me to hear this at Red Rocks live. Oh my God, it was awesome. And so that song is, if I was going to recommend, well, I don't know. If I was going to recommend a song for somebody to listen to, I'd probably say Shake because that's the more like accessible popper
Right.
sounding song of the album. But this is the one that to me really kind of sums up the band and just gives you that feel.
Yeah, yeah. I want to get back to your point about that. You said you're not a big lyrics guy, but this band you could be. I think that's a really important point because some bands I can be, but some it's not as big of a deal. Like when you listen to, say, Nirvana or the Foo Fighters, you don't know what the lyrics are for the most part.
Or a lot of
But
times I do, but I don't really know what they mean.
yeah, or like I find out 20 years later that I was totally wrong on what I thought the lyrics were, and I've
Yeah.
been singing it incorrectly my whole life. But more on that in a different episode, probably. But that's actually one of the reasons that I like Josh McBride is because I like the picture that it kind of painted in your head when you listen to it. When you can picture yourself there Like when he sings about the attic ladder and the barn with broken floors and that whole bit, you're picturing yourself there, and that's what I like in some of these songs. So it just kind of depends on what the song is and what the lyrics are and what it's trying to accomplish, and
Well, right, and a
and
lot of
and that's what Josh McBride did for me. Yes,
the title of the album is "Let's Be Still," and this album is just about it's the kind of thing you can just put on and just chill out to. I mean,
the
and the
whole
lyrics will get you there. And like on the cover of the album, it's two people, they're just laying out in a field in the grass, just and that's the feel it has. And I just think they just absolutely nail it on that.
that's kind of the moral of the entire album is basically to say life is moving too fast. Take a moment, enjoy, live in the moment, and appreciate each other. It's really kind of when you look at all the songs, that's kind of what they're trying to accomplish with the whole album. So I think that is a good title for the album.
One other thing, probably the last thing I would have to say here. I mentioned the lead singer. His name is Jonathan Russell, and I love his voice. But this is a band who actually started. We had two lead singers. So on the first album, the other guy, his name is Josiah Johnson. They both kind of sing back and forth equally. And
Right.
then on this album, they're both on it again. But I think a lot more of the songs were sung by Jonathan Russell. And shortly after this album came out, the other guy, Josiah, left the band for a while. And they just said it was for addiction. Never said he left the band. It was just on hiatus.
Yes.
Um, and just a couple things about that because I'm a huge fan of them. One, I love Jonathan Russell's voice. So the fact that the other guy left the band, I mean, I wish he was still there and they all got along, but I like the other guy better. Like his song, just his voice fits better. So voice wise, it wasn't a huge loss to me as a fan. Um,
Right.
but then the other guy never really has come back, and I think that one thing I did read is that they maybe there was a little more to it. So they said it was addiction, which I'm sure there was something there, obviously. But he might have been upset with this album because not as many of his songs made it, and he didn't maybe like the direction they were going quite as much as the first one. Um, and so they had a little maybe had a little friction, although they've never really come out and said it. And then last thing, so when we went to Red Rocks that time, he had been out of the band for about a year, and they kept every time I looked, it was kind of like he's coming back. He'll be back once he's out of rehab, but he just never really did. But during the encore of that concert, he came out on the stage and he sang two songs with them, and like nobody had seen him for over a year, and so everybody in the audience pretty much knows who he is because if you're there, you're probably a pretty big fan. And so that was another really cool thing that I got to be a part of just by chance, that I got to see him sing with them again there. Um, and then kind of thought, okay, I guess he's back now. Although that's not the case. I don't think he ever came back after that. And he's kind of on solo now instead. So,
Hmm.
but being able to see that concert, hear that song I love, have this guy come out on stage for the encore, it was like you couldn't have scripted a more perfect concert that night. It was just amazing to be there. And
Yeah.
so that was really cool.
That backdrop seems like it was the perfect backdrop for the type of music that this band plays, right? Kind of that mountain backdrop or
Yeah,
anyway.
that's great.
Just a couple of other points about the band before I move on. I did look up and I came across the quote by Josiah Johnson, which was really what he was saying. Somebody asked him, why is this band called The Head and the Heart? And Brad, I don't know if you knew this before or
Oh,
not,
you
but
taught me.
yes, yes. So the quote from Josiah Johnson was, your head is telling you to be stable and find a good job, but you know in your heart that this being the band is what you're supposed to do, even if it's crazy. So I thought that was a pretty good quote, because it is kind of a unique name for a band. As a matter of fact, one other note about the song, one of the songs themselves is "My Friends." When I first heard the song, what immediately stuck in my head was "I Am a Rock" by Simon and Garfunkel. It just has that kind of initial, I'm angry and I hate everybody, but then it sort of changes its tone later. But I could not think about that song as I heard that song for the first time.
I
I
like
don't know
that
if it
song a
hit
lot
you the
too.
same way.
No, but I like that song a lot.
Okay. Um, Other than that, do you have anything else to add about the about this album?
No, the only other thing I was going to say is that, and I still haven't gotten to it, and I need to watch it. But if you want to, if anybody's listening and wants to learn about them another way too, they have a special on Amazon Prime Video right now, and it's a concert they did in Seattle, where they're from. And I haven't watched it yet. I need to watch it, but I think it has some interviews and stuff spliced into that too. So a good introduction to the band, I'm sure, and I'm sure that's why they um, created that and let Amazon do that because it was a great way to maybe advertise who they are and but also shows that there is a audience out there for them, even if they're not, you know, the Weekend or somebody
Right.
like that.
Right.
Not going to be
Right.
doing the
They're
Super
not going to
Bowl
be
anytime,
doing,
sure.
yes, you're right. You're right. But that's okay. Um, so, okay. If you've got nothing else to add, we'll jump over to the next album that we're
Yes,
going to
take it
do.
away.
So, as I was looking at the music from 2013, that I kind of wanted to explore a little bit more than I had maybe during that year, where, as I said, I was spending most of my time watching the Backyardigans. The one album that I did like at the time, at least a couple of songs, and I know this woman actually kind of made her name. I mean, she was already well known, I guess, but uh, became popular at the Grammys, and she gave a really good performance at the Grammys that year. Was Lorde, and she came out with the album Pure Heroin, which many of you may know. But I did want to explore that one. It seemed really intriguing to me, and as I listened to it, I thought, hey, it's 10 songs exactly. Brad's gonna love it because
Oh
he
yeah.
only likes albums that are 10 songs. um, but I thought it was a really good album. Again, I did a kind of a top five list. Did you do a top five list on this one too, Brad? On this album?
No, and mostly because I love pretty much every song on here. So
Okay.
this is one
Well,
of those that is just a true album to me, beginning to end, perfection.
yes, and there were about 7 or 8 songs that were cut from the album, maybe just to please you, Brad, because they wanted to get down to their 10 best ones or her 10 best ones, and I think they did a great job. The best songs for me that stood out were "Tennis Court," which again is the first song on the album, "Royals," which is the one that everybody knows, "Buzzcut Season," "Glory and Gore," and "400 Lux" are the ones that stood out to me on this one. 400
If I
Lux.
were to pick a top five, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same five you just said, because you named some of the ones that stand out to me for sure the most.
Yes, 400 Lux is a really really a smooth, sexy song, a good song to have playing in the background. Really, a lot of the album has a lot of really good bass that kind of stood out to me. Tennis Court was the one that hooked me right away. As you know, that's the first 5 seconds of listening to it, you're hooked. Um, Royals, did you know, Brad, how that song got its name?
Well, since we are re-recording this album, yes, I
I
do,
know,
but
but
no, I did
I'm
not
trying to
before.
act as if you didn't know any of this, and this is the first time that we've actually talked about this. So,
I know, but I did not. You definitely taught me, and this is interesting. I would have never guessed it before.
no, because the song is about materialism, and as much of the album is, and it's about living in excess and all of that kind of stuff. So I just assumed that it was about royals, like the British family, or kings and queens and monarchies, and that kind of stuff, which it really is. But the title of the song she got from looking at a 1976 issue of National Geographic, and there is a picture of George Brett of the Kansas City Royals, a great baseball player of the Kansas City Royals, and she doesn't know anything about baseball, but that picture just kind of stood out to her, and the way that the font and everything, the way that Royals is written on his jersey, I don't know, it just stood out to her, and so she loved it, and so it sort of gave her the idea for the song, and so you can say that George Brett was the inspiration for this song, and it kind of came out later that they had really never met, but they had always kind of wanted to because this was her big breakout song, and George Brett loved it and everything as well. So they tried to arrange for him to be able to attend a concert when she was performing in Kansas City, but that didn't work out. And so they tried a couple of different times. Eventually, George Brett had sent her an autographed jersey saying, quote, "Lord, you are royal to me." So that's kind of cool. And then eventually they did get to meet. There's actually a picture of them. You can go Google it if you'd like, or maybe we'll post it on our Twitter page. But just a cool kind of story. And she, by the way, is from New Zealand, so it's not like you would think that she would have heard of the Kansas City Royals just on the off chance. So very interesting little
That is a
story.
way cool story that I would have never possibly guessed. And I love that they actually like kind of had an interaction and everything. How different do you think the song would have been if she saw a picture of, say, Steve Balboni of the Royals?
I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have been about living in excess. It would have, or Dan
Just trying to
Quisenberry,
think of a bigger, funny looking kind of guy.
or Dan Quisenberry. She could have called it submarine or something like that.
Yeah.
But um, but anyway, see, the Ribs song is the one that didn't quite appeal to me quite as much as some of the other ones. Not really sure why. It just didn't. If I were to skip a song on the album, that would have been the one. Buzzcut Season was a really cool song. It's like a high school type song, and I kept picturing, and I remember thinking this a couple of times as I was listening to the album. I would picture Lorde. And by the way, when she came out with this song, she was only like, or this whole album, she was like, what, 17 years old?
17.
So it's really amazing. But I kind of picture her as a girl in high school that would hate the jocks and all the cool kids and all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, she's not a total nerd either. She might be like a step towards goth, but not really goth in that, like you picture a goth person, right? So uh, um, that's just kind of what I kept thinking as I was listening.
Yeah, I figure she could kind of just kind of be an amoeba and kind of come and go from most groups actually, and not really just be into any one. But
Yeah, she wouldn't care about being in a clique or anything like that. Um,
but
a
who
team,
knows?
yeah, maybe. I mean, this is just my impression. Maybe she would. We should get her on the show next time, and she can explain what she really was like in high school. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll work on that. The song "Team" has a really cool bass line that you would expect to hear in an Abercrombie and Fitch store. That's what I thought the first time I heard it. Um, just kind of that. I don't even. I can't do like a beatbox. I'm not going to try. Forget it.
I think you should
Uh,
try.
well, with the sound issues that we've had on this microphone, maybe I will not give it a try. So just trust me. Just go out and listen to it. Glory and Gore
Love that one.
was a fantastic song. I just loved it. Still Sane also. White Teeth Teens. Now you had mentioned that there's actually I didn't quite pick up on this, but there's a few songs or a few mentions of teeth in the
Yeah,
album.
it's kind of like a running theme.
I should recommend it to my
She
wife.
talks about jewels on your teeth and having like white and bright teeth and just things that show status, but you don't really think about that much. At least I didn't with teeth.
My wife is a dental hygienist. I'm sure she would love this album. So, um, a World Alone was a good song. This is the last song I think on the album.
Yeah,
It
I
was
love that
good,
one.
but not. Yeah, it's good, but to me, it wasn't as good as some of the others I mentioned. It might get honorable mention for that top five, but it was a good song, good closing song.
All
That's
right.
my commentary on the album. What do you got
Okay.
to say?
Well, I really enjoyed listening. I knew I loved this album, but I probably haven't listened to it for, I don't know, it came out in 2013. It's probably been 3, 4 years almost maybe since I listened to it. Maybe I listened to it once in there. But so going back and listening to it all the way through again, I was like reminded I was obsessed with this album when it came out. Like I loved it. And it was just so different. I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know even what it was about it because as I'm listening to it, so I found this little description. It's been described as dream pop, electronica, and electro pop album with minimalist production, deep bass, and programmed beats.
Took my words exactly.
and that like sums it up. But as I'm listening to it, I'm like, I don't even know what the instruments are. It sounds like there's just maybe this one little keyboard making a sound here and there. And you'd think it'd be so weird or so boring or not something that I would like, but it just fits together so perfectly. I love it. And it was just such a different sound. And I loved her lyrics and I loved what it was all about. I teach middle schoolers. And so a lot of the themes are things that I see or think about or hear about every day. And I don't know, I loved it. I just loved everything about it, and it became something that I listened to over and over again. Um, when I first got it, there were two songs that I didn't really listen to. One was Ribs, like you said, and one was Still Sane, which it sounded like you really liked. Um, since that time, I finally decided to just complete the album. I still don't really care much for Still Sane, but I do really like Ribs. But the other eight, it's kind of like when we talked about Weezer. I just think the whole album is great, beginning to end. It has
Oh,
that running feel, that theme. Every song is different but similar, and I don't know. I can put it on and go all the way through and love it. And so
you don't get
I
you.
think she
There's
really. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's no point in the album where you really get bored, like we've talked about in previous episodes, like Prince, 1999,
Yeah,
which we discussed. It's a very good album, and don't get us wrong, but there are a couple of songs where it just gets long with the guitar solos and riffs and everything.
right. And if you're into
But
that,
with
that's
this, I
great.
never got bored. Yeah,
Um, I think she just kind of set a newer sound. And I'm sure the sound was out there, but she was maybe the one who really was big now because she became this huge sensation critically and commercially.
right.
Um, to me, the easiest connection to make to her right now would be Billie Eilish, who I don't like nearly as much as Lorde, but my kids listen to her. I do like a lot of her songs though, and it has that same very minimalist where there's just not a lot going on musically. Or, I mean, there probably is actually, but like you're not hearing as much sound, and
Yeah.
it's all about the lyrics and the feel, and so I think that she's probably was influenced or at least somewhat put on that track by Lorde back then because she's very young too. Speaking of, I don't think you said this yet. So she was the youngest person to hit number one since
Tiffany, right?
Tiffany with I Think We're Alone
Yes.
Now. Correct. And I
Yes.
don't see a lot of a comparison between the two of them as far as the type of song or how they got there, but
Completely opposites.
we were in middle school when Tiffany came out and we loved her and Debbie Gibson. But so to see that there's been nobody between that at that age is kind of actually I was surprised to see that. I thought there's been other big kind of young sensations, but she's the youngest one since Tiffany.
Yeah, and as I think we kind of talked about too, is that I think it's more difficult for a male artist to be that popular that young because you go that's when your voice is changing and that kind of stuff. But the only other one that I could think of maybe might be Hanson, but there were three guys.
That was
But
yeah,
I
because
don't
they're a
know.
band, and so it just seems a little different than a solo person.
Yeah, but
I
what
thought of the
males were
Biebs,
good?
Justin
Who? Oh,
Bieber.
Justin Bieber.
I don't
Yes, yeah.
remember exactly how young he was, but he was pretty young. So,
Yeah, I thought he was like, yeah, maybe 17 or 18 in that time frame.
but
But
so this is another one where I love the lyrics. I just wrote a few down, and like I know that like these stood out to me, but like I used to, like I said, I taught middle school, junior high, and I used to put like a lyric up on a board every day, just because like a quote, but I would pick song lyrics, and the kids would sometimes point at like couldn't believe that the Lord was up there, and they thought that was so cool, and but you mentioned tennis court, and I love the lines. It's a new art form showing people how little we care. I just love that line and how teenagers, they act. It's an art form. Maybe they don't care, maybe they do care, but it's their way of acting disaffected and like we don't care about anything. And that whole um, mindset of kids that age. And I just thought she nailed it with that one.
right.
And then she
That
also said, we're so happy even when we're smiling out of fear, which kind of shows maybe the other side where inside, they have these feelings and they're scared of something, but they put on that face to try
yep.
to act a different way. I love the line in 400 Lux, we're hollow like the bottles that we drain. I don't know if she's referring necessarily like to drinking or maybe even like pill bottles or something, but just how, dealing with things and inside you're hollow, there's nothing there, and that's how you might feel sometimes. When I found out she was 17, I was just blown away because I knew the song Royals before that, and I'm like, this woman is amazing. This is a great song. And then I found out she was 17, and I had to listen to it over and over. I just could not buy it. I just couldn't believe this was a 17-year-old. Her voice doesn't sound like it. The song being so amazing didn't sound like it. So
And
I'm
she,
so
as I
impressed
understand it,
with.
she like writes her own music, right? It's not like it's not written by a big production company.
I
She needed
believe,
help.
yeah, the
She needed
lyrics
help with a
especially.
production company with like the background music and getting it out there and everything. But the songs are her own,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
So again, that's kind of where I'm saying the dip. So Tiffany, she did a cover song, and I don't think she ever really did much after that. She had the one big song, "Could Have Been," but she had like one album. This
Yeah.
is a person who's got a future. She's had a big album since. She doesn't put them out very often, but you know that there's a lot more substance there, and this is somebody who's going to be around
Yes.
probably for a while.
Absolutely.
So
Um,
great choice, and this is definitely one that was on the popular scale that hopefully everybody listening would know at least a little bit about.
and if they don't, they should go listen to it
Yeah.
right after listening to this. It'll be well worth your time. So, without further ado, then we will jump into our top five music in 2013. Do you want to go first on your music, Brad?
Sure. Okay. So I mentioned at the beginning that this is the year, I mentioned the head and the heart, but this is the year where I discovered a bunch of bands that a couple of them were new and a couple of them maybe had like one album out or so. But this is when I found them. And basically, I've owned everything they've put out ever since. And they've become some of my favorite bands. And none of these are going to be huge names. Again, they're more like in my own personal taste, but that's what we're talking about here. So I did have for number one, I had this album by Lorde because at that time, this is the one I listened to more than anything, and I still love it.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned the Grammys. So my number two, when we watched the Grammys that year, a different artist came on, and her name was Casey Musgraves, and she is a country singer. And my wife and I are watching her, and like, this is just a great song. I mean, this was so cool. She sang the song "Follow Your Arrow," which is not like your typical country song at all. And she's kind of not so much like Taylor Swift necessarily, but she's definitely her sound has gone less and less country with each album since.
Mm-hmm.
But her first couple, I loved her because I love like older classic country. I can't stand like new poppy country.
Right.
But she had definitely that old time feel, and she goes back that way. And anyway, I love her. She's
A little
amazing.
more
She won.
authentic.
I think that album won the Grammy for best album that year, and it was her debut. I'd never heard of her till that night, and now I've seen her in concert a couple times, and it's another one my whole family likes. The Head and the Heart I've already mentioned. Number four is a band I love. Cage the Elephant had an album that year called Melophobia, and they're huge like on alternative stations. They're a well-known rock alternative band. Hopefully, people would know them.
You saw them at First Ave, did you not?
No, I
Was it
saw them at
First
the
Ave?
Target Center.
Oh, at Target Center.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And number five is a band that is more, they're not country, they're like the alt country. I like to use that term. The Wild Feathers. And their debut came out that year. And they're a small band. They're not a hugely known band at all. But they are awesome. And I know that you and me both grew up loving the Jayhawks
Yes.
from Minnesota. And the Jayhawks are kind of similar. That's how I describe them, as that kind of a sound. And speaking of, you mentioned, bands that didn't get big, but the Jayhawks would be another one. I mean, that's a band back in the 80s, well, the 90s mostly, pretty successful band, but in their own little market. So I compare the Head and the Heart kind of to them as far as like, a lot of people knew the Jayhawks, and they even had moments where they almost kind of hit it big. Like the song Blue was a really
Blue was big.
pretty big
Yes.
song. But they were generally within their own market. Now, would we know them in Tyler? Probably not. We knew of them because my brother and sister, who were in college, introduced me, which introduced everybody else that I knew to them,
Yes.
and that's how we found stuff. And then I have one other one and another band that I love, and they actually opened for the Head and the Heart twice when I've gone to see them, is the band Group Love, and they're awesome. And they're a much more like upbeat, poppy. I mean, they're more alternative, but it's like pop alternative. Like there's a lot of really great songs and more like upbeat type music. They're just way fun, and I love them. One of their bigger hits would have been the song called Tongue Tied, which I'm sure most people would know that song, but they've had several others as well. So
Okay.
all those bands pretty much either came out or I discovered that year. And like I couldn't leave one out because I own everything that they've done. I love it. So it's a great year.
Yeah, that was the year 2013. I mean, these are the bands that I just kind of, or music that I remember from the year that stand out as I was looking up what was big. Blurred Lines, that was the year. It was all kind of the same kind of music. It was Blurred Lines, Roar, Wrecking Ball, were they're kind of in their own little group. Um, with you had Katy Perry, you had what's Miley Cyrus. The one song that I really remember from that year that I know that you're going to hate me for this because I know how you feel about Hootie and the Blowfish, but Wagon Wheel by Darius Rucker. That's a good, it's a country song. He crossed over totally to
You're right. I
country.
hate you.
There's around that's yeah, good, good. But it's it's a good little song. You should give it a listen. It sounds just like Hootie and the Blowfish, so it's
Yeah,
not.
I don't know that song by name, but I've heard a few of his songs. Like so I mean, I recognize the voice right away and I know their
You
country and
do.
it sounds, it's whatever. Go ahead. I don't care.
I don't know what you hate about Hootie and the Blowfish so
I
much,
don't
but
hate them. I don't know. I tried to like them when they came out and I think I resented how successful they were for some reason. I just didn't feel like they earned it.
all right.
And personally, when I hear their songs now, I mean, to me, I don't know why. To me, they don't age well. Like they don't sound good anymore. They might have been huge then, but to me, and do you hear them ever anymore?
Not really, no.
There's a lot of '90s
Unless
bands
I
you hear
deliver
all the
it.
time still.
You're
I don't
right.
hear Hootie and the Blowfish ever.
No, no.
So
But when
maybe
you do, it does take you back to the day, and you remember good times. And I don't know. I listened to the album quite a bit in that era when it was out. But I
anyway,
don't
I think you're overstating. I don't hate them. I just never became.
I know. I just like
I
the
didn't
leadership.
get it. I didn't get how they, of all bands, just became this phenomenon there for a year or two.
All right. Um, and the other one, kind of another country artist that I do actually enjoy is Blake Shelton. Another, he's a big, has become commercial, but I do like some of his music. Boys Round Here was a big one. And the reason some of those ones pop up is because my wife listens to K102, the country station around here all the time, so I do get to hear some of the newer stuff. Boys Around Here was a big song in that year, and it's still they do play it a lot, along with Blake Shelton's other stuff. But um, that's really all I had about 2013. Do you have anything else there, Brad?
No, but I do remember that summer specifically. And like I said, I don't love a ton of pop music, but I gotta say, I loved the song Blurred Lines and heard it over and over again. And unless you didn't say it,
Guilty
unless
pleasure.
I'm pretty certain this is also the summer of Get Lucky by Daft Punk,
Oh
which
yes, that's
which was
correct.
another one. And I just associate that summer with those two songs. And they're just
Oh,
two of those songs that I
they,
never really got sick of. Like I just thought they were fun to hear on the radio.
yeah, that's a song that we just heard that it came on the other day, and my wife said it reminded her of the Bee Gees, which I'd never really thought of before, but I saw what
Which
she was
one?
saying. Daft Punk,
Okay.
Get Lucky. But then when you go and listen to the music, it's kind of funky, and yeah, it kind of makes sense when she mentioned that. By the way, they just gave up their helmets. They're not wearing their helmets anymore. Did you see that?
Well, I did. I thought they actually like
Big
quit.
fan.
Like I thought they were breaking up or retiring or something,
Oh, I thought maybe they are,
or maybe
but
it's
I
the
had
helmet thing.
heard
And
that they were just giving up the helmet thing.
I'm not sure. But
I,
yeah,
I
I mean, I saw something on that line in the news. So
I also read that each of those helmets is worth $65,000. Like they put so much like sound equipment and everything. That's
wow.
how much it costs for each of those helmets. So Interesting little fun fact
It's
there.
about as valuable as the basketball helmets that we made back in 1992.
Not quite that valuable. Um, I think that about wraps up our show, unless you have anything more.
Yeah, that's our music episode. Hopefully we said something that you will go listen to and enjoy there.
Yes, well, or if you don't listen to the music, listen to more episodes of Pop Culture Yearbook because
There
we
you
would
go.
appreciate it. And again, I do want to comment. We do appreciate any comments on social media, Facebook. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Add any comments. Maybe we'll read them on a future episode. We'd love to see those and hear them. So I do also want to
Oh,
give.
also, can I say one
Yes.
other thing?
No, you may not.
We've we received a couple of our first reviews too, and we would love it if, especially on Apple, where you can leave your reviews. If anybody's enjoying this, please give us a review and say something on there nice. It would make our day. We're not going to beg
Yes.
for it, but if you do like it and are willing to, you're going to make two guys pretty happy. So,
That would be awesome. We're trying to get our show off the ground, and any publicity we can get is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much. I do also want to give a shout out to Preacher Row. They are the music that they're a band that are close friends of ours, and they've allowed us to use their music for each of our episodes. So we want to give a shout out to them each episode. And that's the music that you'll be hearing now. Please keep an eye out for our next episode when we'll be wrapping up 2013 by talking about the Whack album. A lot of fun there. So very
and Saturday Night Live.
and Saturday Night Live. So Andy Samberg is kind of the guy behind the Whack album. So it's a lot of fun. Give it a listen, and then listen to our show. And without further ado, I think that'll wrap it up. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.
See you next time.
All right.
Standing on my own 2 feet, no one's gonna comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your son is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. Next time, tell me on my back. Hard turn and